In this video I'm going to show you how to use CSS Grid. CSS Grid gives you the tools to create basic and advanced website layouts in a responsive way that looks great on mobile, tablet and desktop devices. So what is CSS Grid? CSS Grid allows you to create a matrix of row and columns, so you can place your elements where you want them on the grid, and you can align them easily. So let's get started. Here I am in Visual Studio Code. I have my usual setup where I have three files: an index.html file for the HTML, a styles.css for CSS, and inside the index.html there is a link to the styles.css. Also there's a script.js for JavaScript, although this video is about CSS grid layouts, so we probably won't need to touch the script.js. I have an extension inside Visual Studio Code called Live Server. I can use Live Server to enable me to run a local server on my PC, so that I can run my HTML pages and view them as they would appear on a web hosting website. I can click on this button at the bottom of the screen, which currently says port 5500, but when it is not enabled it says go live, and if I click on it I can run my local server on port 5500. I'll close this to give us a bit more room. I'm going to start with columns. I'm going to create a container div with an ID content and 12 divs inside. So hash content div times 12, like that, 1, and then number them, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Right, save that and go to stars.css. Going to create a reset to set box sizing, border box, and margin 0 and padding 0. So this will set box size into border box everywhere, because the asterisk means everywhere, and the same for margin will be 0 and padding will be 0. And then hash content to select the content container. I'm going to make that display grid, so that gives us our grid. We make it a width of 100% and set the columns grid template columns 1FR 1FR 1FR. FR stands for fraction unit, and creating 3 of them means that I'll have 3 evenly spaced columns, like so. But there's another way you can do it when you have a lot of these FRs. You can do repeat and then the number of repeats you want and then just put FR. So if you say I had 10 FRs, rather than put one FR 10 times, you could do repeat 10, 1 FR. So font family, I'm going to give this, make this just sans serif, and font size, make this 2 rem, and height, I want it to be full height, so I'll do 100 VH viewport height, and then for each div, content div, select the div, and background color is #457 B9D. You can see the sort of bluey color, and then for the text I'm going to make it color -F1F AEE, and then hash content div, and then I'm going to use this pseudo element nth child. I'm going to put even inside, so this will select all the even number of divs. Give it a background color, a different color, so hash E63946. Right, and if you save that, we get a matrix of different colors. And notice that we for the first column we have repeat 3 times 1 FR, so 1 fractional unit for the first column, and then it assumes for the second column is the same, and the third and the fourth column. And also, if I expand it to full screen, it's responsive, and I can adjust it, and it adjusts with the way I'm adjusting it, like so. That's because I used FR fraction units. Next, I want to create the following. In the first example, I defined only columns, and Grid was clever enough to put the other rows in. With this more complicated example, I'm going to have to define the rows as well. But how many? Let's draw some grid lines to see what we need. As you can see from here, there are 3 columns and 4 rows. I can also see that header is on row 1 and spans 3 columns. Aside is on row 2 and spans 1 column. Nav is on row 3 and spans 1 column. Main is on row 2 and spans 2 rows, and is on column 2 and spans 2 columns. And the footer is on row 4 and spans 3 columns. So I'm going to create a div with a class of content, with a ID of content rather, and then inside here I'm going to create a header and an aside and a nav and main and footer. And inside here I'm going to put the text header, aside, nav, main and footer. So these are the elements that I'm going to place in my grid. So I go to styles.css, already have the box sizing border box from before set up. And I'm going to do hash content for the ID and display grid and grid template rows and repeat want 4 rows, 1 fraction, and grid template columns repeat 3 1 fr. So 3 columns and 4 rows we're having. And font family is sans serif as before, and font size is 2 rem, and height is the vertical height of the screen, so 100 VH. So now I'm going to do hash content header. I'm going to position the header, and what we do is we do grid row, and I want it in row 1, the top row, and I want to give it grid column is 1, 2, 4. Now you may think that it should be 1 to 3, but the thing is, on this grid column, the way you count it is you count it from the side, so it's 1, 2, 3, and then 4 for the end one, so it's 1 extra. If I press F12 and go into DevTools, click on this grid, it gives me the grid. You see you've got 1 to 4. Put that back to the other normal size. That's it. What you do is you put the first grid line that you want it to go from, and then a /, and then you put the last grid line you want it to go to. And for the grid row, it's just 1. You can just put 1 because it's only 1 this way. So I'm going to give it a background color of hash 05668D and a color of hash EBF2FA. And then onto the aside, content aside, grid row 2, grid column 1. We only have one each way for the aside. I'm going to give it a background color of hash 679436, and the color's the same as this for the text. Wait. And then next we do the nav. And it's on grid row 3 and grid column is just 1. And has a background color of hash A5BE00, and the color is the same as the others for the text. And next do the main, content main, grid row, and it starts on 2, grid line 2, and it goes to grid line 4. And grid column starts on column 2 line and ends on 4 also. And the background color hash 05668D and the color is the same as before. Right. That's it. That's it. I just need to center the text. I can do that easily with display flex and justify content center and align items center. And then if I just copy that to this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, save that, and that's the text centered. Suppose I want the main to go on the left hand side and the aside and nav to go on the right. I can change it quite easily. Go to the aside, grid row remains the same. The aside grid column goes from 1 to 3, and nav grid row remains the same, and the nav grid column goes from 1 to 3. And the main row stays the same, and the main column goes from 2 to 4 to 1 to 3. Save that, and there you have it. I can also use percentages to set the rows and columns. So if I go back here, instead of FR, I can go 25%, and here I can go 33%. And I have the same grid. I can also mix up the values. So if I go to the rows and replace this with 25%, 200 pixels, and repeat to 25%. Save that, and I get that. If I go back to fractional units, I want to show you another interesting thing. Delete this. Make this 4 again, and this 1 FR, and this 1 FR. Now if I go to the index.html, I'm going to put some text, lorem ipsum, in the aside. So I'm going to go lorem 15 and then tab, and we get that text. Notice what happens to the aside. It expands to fit the text. However, if I go back to styles and I make this 25% and 33%, the text overflows, but the aside remains what we set it to. So with the fractional units, it actually expands to fit the text, but with the percentages, it doesn't. I'll go back to 1FR 1FR, and then index.html. Put this back to the side. And if you want a gap between your items, you just use gap, and that will put a gap between each item. So if I make it 1EM, we have a gap, and it's just between the item, not on the outside. If I want the gap to just be on between the rows, I can go 1EM 0. Now it's just between the rows. And if I want it between the columns only, I can go 0 and then 1EM. And now it's just between the columns. Right, I'm going to delete this. Next, I want to show you how to nest a grid within a grid. So I'm going to go to the index.html, and inside the main I'm going to put 4 p tags. One, 2, 3, 4. Save that and go to styles.css. Next I go to content main, and just here I'm going to do display grid and grid template columns is 1FR, 1FR, and don't need this anymore for here. Delete that. And then I'm going to create for p tags, hash content main p, and then do border 2px solid white and height 100%, padding top is 3EM and padding bottom is 3EM. Save that. To center the text, the numbers, go text, align, center. And there you have it. I think that's enough for this video. In the next video I will continue with grids, and we'll be talking about grid areas. Thanks for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video. If so, please subscribe for more.